Step out of the vehicle right now, Miss Perfect. You think that lieutenant colonel rank means something out here. Out here, I am the law. Get out, or I'll drag you out in cuffs. Just like I put your sweet little sister in her place at home. The blinding flashlight beam hit my eyes, accompanied by a sick, twisted smirk. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't drifting out of my lane. Marcus, my scumbag brother-in-law, was just using his county police badge to satisfy his pathetic, fragile ego. He wanted to crush my pride on an empty highway, desperate to prove he held the same toxic, suffocating authority over me that he used to cage my sister for years. He truly believed that piece of tin on his chest made him untouchable. But he forgot who he was messing with. Trust me, this is the encounter that will permanently destroy the twisted hierarchy of this family. But before I show you exactly how I stripped him of that arrogant badge, take a second to hit like and subscribe if you never tolerate domestic abuse. And let me know in the comments, if you were in my shoes, would you swallow your pride to save face for the family? Or would you drag him to federal court just like I did? Let's get started. The flashing red and blue strobes bounced violently off the reinforced glass of my government-issued Chevy Tahoe. It was 1:45, an empty pitch-black stretch of Interstate 81. I shifted my eyes to the rearview mirror. He didn't approach the vehicle like a cop. He approached like a bouncer itching for a bar fight. Marcus. His heavy boots crunched against the loose gravel on the shoulder. He walked with a wide, arrogant swagger, his right hand resting heavily on the grip of his Glock. He wasn't following standard traffic stop protocols. No tapping the taillight to leave a fingerprint. No cautious, angled approach. He just marched straight up to my window, practically vibrating with the urge to step on someone's neck. I rolled the glass down exactly 3 inches, not a fraction more. A maglite beam stabbed through the narrow gap. It hit my retinas, sharp and burning. "License and registration," he barked. He pitched his voice loud, trying to sound like a god in the dark. He leaned closer, and the stale smell of old coffee mixed with his cheap, overpowering cologne leaked into my cabin. "You were swerving back there. Have you been drinking tonight?" I didn't blink. I didn't raise a hand to shield my eyes from the glare. My hands remained locked on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. My jaw clamped shut so tight my teeth ached. A civilian might have panicked. A normal sister-in-law might have yelled, cursed him out, or demanded to know what his problem was. But right now, the lieutenant colonel took over. I shoved the anger down into my gut. I let the icy mechanical discipline of a commanding officer flood my veins. "This is a federal vehicle, deputy," I said. My voice was flat, dead, devoid of any pitch or panic. "You are outside your jurisdiction," and I was holding a dead straight line at exactly 65 miles per hour. His silhouette shifted in the dark. The flashlight lowered just an inch, enough for me to see his crooked, sweaty smirk. His chest puffed out under his Kevlar vest. That badge pinned to his uniform gave him a high, entirely swallowing whatever microscopic caution he had left. "I decide the jurisdiction out here, Jill." He sneered, completely dropping the official act. He grabbed the heavy metal handle of my door and yanked it hard. It was locked. He slapped his open palm against the glass. "Step out, now. I'm conducting a field sobriety test." Right there. That sharp smack of his hand against my window. That was the exact second the last remaining thread of family loyalty snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him that my sister, his wife, was probably waiting up for him in their living room right now. Without a single wasted motion, my right hand slid off the leather wheel and dropped toward the center console. My thumb found the smooth glass of my phone. I didn't even need to look down. Muscle memory guided my finger. Swipe up, tap the red circle. Recording engaged. I popped the lock and pushed the heavy door open, forcing him to take a clumsy step back. The freezing Pennsylvania wind whipped across the asphalt, biting through my uniform jacket, but I didn't shiver. I stepped out and planted my boots on the pavement. I squared my shoulders, straightening my spine until I towered over his slumped, insecure posture. I looked dead into his eyes. "Just to be clear," I stated, my voice crisp, projecting perfectly toward the microphone sitting in my cup holder. "I am complying with your order, but you are detaining a federal officer without probable cause. This interaction is on the record." Marcus scoffed, spitting a glob of saliva onto the yellow line near my boots. "Save the military bullshit. Walk the line, heel to toe. Let's see how perfect you really are." He pointed his flashlight at the solid white line marking the highway shoulder. He wanted a show. He wanted to see me wobble in the freezing wind. He wanted to strip away the uniform, the rank and the medals he could never earn, reducing me to the same helpless, terrified state he kept Sarah in. I turned toward the white line. I brought my right heel down directly in front of my left toe. The thick rubber sole of my combat boot hit the asphalt with a dull, heavy thud. Then the left foot. Then the right. Thud, thud, thud. I didn't look down at my feet. I stared straight ahead into the black void of the highway. My arms stayed rigid at my sides. My balance was flawless. It was the exact same march I had executed on parade grounds, the same steady walk I held when mortar sirens wailed overseas. I walked that painted line with a brutal mechanical precision that sucked the oxygen right out of his little power trip. 10 steps. Pivot. 10 steps back. I stopped right in front of him. I didn't break a sweat. My breathing was completely even. The smirk vanished from his face. The beam of his flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. He was staring at a machine, and he knew it. The grand humiliation he planned had completely backfired. Frustration tightened his doughy features. He ripped a crumpled ticket book from his back pocket, scribbled aggressively, and tore the yellow slip out with a sharp, angry pull. He didn't hand it to me. He shoved it hard against my chest, forcing me to trap it against my jacket so the wind wouldn't take it. Failure to maintain a lane. He grunted. His voice lost its theatrical boom. Pay it online, and watch your back on my roads. He spun around, marching heavily back to his cruiser. The heavy door slammed shut with a rusty squeak. The engine roared to life, tires kicking up dirt as he aggressively pulled back onto the highway, leaving me standing alone in the dark. I stood there for a moment, the icy wind stinging my cheeks. I slowly lowered my hand, looking at the crumpled yellow ticket. The faint, sickening smell of his cheap cologne clung to the paper. I didn't yell after his taillights. I didn't tear the ticket up. I just folded it neatly into a perfect, crisp square and slipped it into my pocket. Marcus drove away, thinking he had put me in my place. He thought he had won. He had no idea that the phone in my car had just captured every single second of his federal violation. He had just handed me the exact rope I needed. Now all I had to do was wrap it around his neck. The heavy tires of the Chevy Tahoe hummed a low, monotonous drone against the dark asphalt of Interstate 81. Inside the cabin, the heater was blowing on full blast, fighting off the bitter Pennsylvania cold. But it was also circulating a smell I could not escape. It wafted off the crumpled yellow ticket sitting on my passenger seat. A cheap, overpowering cologne mixed with stale coffee and arrogance. Marcus's signature scent. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, but that dead giveaway smell dragged my mind backward. It pulled me straight back to my mother's dining room. Last November. Thanksgiving dinner. The house had been suffocatingly hot. The air was thick with the smell of scorched turkey skin, heavy gravy, and the cheap boxed wine my mother bought in bulk. Marcus was already 3 beers deep before the food even hit the table. His face carried that ugly, aggressive red flush he always got when he was feeling untouchable. Sarah, my younger sister, was sitting quietly next to him. She wore a new pale blue dress. She looked nice. She also looked terrified. Her shoulders were hunched, making herself as small as humanly possible, her eyes constantly darting towards his hands. Marcus hated when she looked nice. He hated anything that did not revolve entirely around him. He reached across the table for the salt shaker. He did not ask anyone to pass it. He just lunged. His heavy elbow clipped his oversized wine glass. The stem snapped. Dark red liquid cascaded directly into Sarah's lap, soaking instantly into the pale blue fabric of her chest. It looked like a fresh, massive bloodstain. Sarah gasped and jumped up her chair, scraping violently against the hardwood floor. Marcus did not apologize. He laughed, a loud, wet braying sound that echoed in the cramped room. Look at you, he mocked, pointing a thick finger at her. Always making a mess. Can't even sit at a damn table right. Go clean yourself up. You look ridiculous. I stopped cutting my meat. I gripped my steak knife, the serrated edge biting into the ceramic plate. I looked across the table at my mother. I waited for her to say something. Anything. I waited for my uncle to stand up. I waited for a single person sharing my bloodline to tell this loudmouth bully to shut his mouth. They did nothing. My uncle took a slow, deliberate sip of his ice water. My mother simply looked down at her plate and continued sawing away at her dry, overcooked turkey. The rhythmic clinking of silverware against porcelain never stopped. They just kept chewing. That was the real violence. It was not the yelling. It was the silence of the enablers, the complete cowardly complicity of my own family. Later that evening, I cornered my mother by the refrigerator. I asked her how she could sit there and let him humiliate Sarah in our own house. My mother did not even look me in the eye. She wiped down the counter with a dirty sponge. "Don't start a fight, Jillian," she whispered, her voice tight with annoyance. "Men with badges carry a lot of stress. He provides for her. He has a solid county pension. Sarah is lucky to have a man who sticks around. Just let it go. Do not ruin this holiday." Lucky. I wore a bronze star on my uniform. I had commanded troops in combat zones where the air tasted like sand and copper. But in this house, my rank meant nothing. My voice was dead air. They worshipped the illusion of a perfect middle-class American family, and they were perfectly willing to sacrifice Sarah's sanity to keep up the facade. I walked away from my mother and pushed through the swinging door into the laundry room. Sarah was standing in the dark by the utility sink. She was scrubbing frantically at the red stain on her dress with a wet paper towel. Her hands were shaking violently. I walked up behind her and gently grabbed her wrist. "Stop," I said. "The dress is ruined, Sarah." She flinched, a hard instinctive jerk away from my touch. The sleeve of her oversized cardigan slipped down her shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. Right there on her pale bicep was a massive dark purple bruise. It was turning a sickly yellow around the edges. 4 distinct, brutal finger marks on the front. A heavy thumbprint on the back. A grip designed to inflict maximum pain. A grip meant to control. My jaw locked. The cold fury I felt on the battlefield flooded my chest. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "I am calling the domestic violence hotline," I stated. I was not asking for permission. I dialed the first number. Before I could hit the second, Sarah dropped to the cold linoleum floor. She grabbed the fabric of my uniform trousers. She was sobbing, gasping for air in short, panicked bursts. "Don't! Please don't, Jill!" she begged, her voice cracking. "He told me if I ever talk, he will use his buddies at the precinct. He said he will get a county judge to declare me an unfit mother. He will take the kids, Jill. He said no one believes a crazy unemployed housewife over a decorated cop. Please, he will take my babies." I stared down at her. She was completely broken. He had isolated her, weaponized her own children against her, and used his badge as a shield for his cowardice. I put the phone away. I knelt down on the cold floor and held her while she cried. I swallowed my rage. I let him win that night because I did not have a bulletproof strategy to protect my niece and nephew. But tonight is different. I pull my focus back to the dark highway. The heater is still blowing. The smell of his cologne is still suffocating. I look over at the yellow ticket resting on the passenger seat. Marcus thought tonight was just another Thanksgiving dinner. He thought he could push me around on the shoulder of Interstate 81 the exact same way he pushed Sarah around in her kitchen. He thought I would just swallow the humiliation to protect the family name. He made a fatal error. A tyrant never stops until they are crushed. Appeasement only breeds more cruelty. By using his patrol car and his state-issued authority to threaten me, he stripped away his own camouflage. He brought the government into family business. He's no longer a brother-in-law. He's a hostile target who just handed me federal jurisdiction. I grip the leather steering wheel. I approach the exit that leads to my suburban neighborhood. I do not touch the blinker. I do not turn the wheel. Instead, I slam my heavy boot down on the gas pedal. The engine roars, fighting against the freezing wind. The SUV surges forward, tearing down the highway, leaving my house far behind. I'm heading straight for the military logistics base. It is time to go to work. The heavy tires of my Tahoe hit the steel security grating at the main gate of the Army Logistics Command. It was over 400 hours. The Pennsylvania air was bone-chilling, biting straight through my jacket, but it felt clean. It did not smell like stale beer, burnt turkey, or cheap cologne. The military police officer on duty stepped out of the guard shack. He saw the plates. He saw my face. He snapped a crisp, razor-sharp salute. He did not ask me if I was lost. He did not tell me to smile. He showed the exact respect the uniform demanded. I returned the salute, the stiff fabric of my sleeve brushing my side. No fake smiles, no forced small talk. I rolled the window up and drove through the reinforced gates. I parked in my reserved spot. The concrete lot was empty, bathed in the harsh yellow glow of the sodium lights. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the headquarters building. The rubber soles of my boots squeaked slightly against the highly polished linoleum. It was dead quiet. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the overhead fluorescent tubes. This was my fortress. Back at my mother's house, I was just the spinster aunt, the woman they hit up for loans when their credit cards maxed out, a convenient punching bag to make a washed-up county cop feel like a real man. But here, in this building, I was a commanding officer. Every decision made inside these concrete walls was based on hard, undeniable facts. There was no room for pathetic egos. There was no sweeping garbage under the rug to save a fragile family dynamic. I unlocked my office door. The lights flicked on, automatically hitting the drywall behind my heavy oak desk. Framed behind anti-glare glass was my bronze star. Hanging directly below it was my officer's saber. I looked at the metal for a long second. Earning those took blood, sweat, and the lives of good people. Marcus got his tin badge out of a cereal box compared to this. I dropped my keys on the desk. They hit the wood with a sharp clack. I sat down in the leather chair, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick black USB cable. I plugged my phone into the encrypted federal terminal. The system prompted for my common access card. I shoved the plastic chip into the reader, punched in my PIN, and opened the secure drive. A dry, sharp click of the mouse. The video file transferred. I dragged the file onto my main 32-inch monitor. I hit play. The interior of my Tahoe filled the screen, flashing with aggressive red and blue strobes. Then, Marcus filled the frame. His doughy, flushed face leaned into the lens, twisted into that sick, arrogant smirk. Step out. Now, I'm conducting a field sobriety test. The audio spit out of the desk speakers, loud and grainy. I watched his heavy hand grab the door handle. I watched him try to rip me out of my own vehicle on a dark highway. I hit the left arrow key, rewind, play it again. I did not feel angry anymore. The burning heat in my chest from the highway was gone. The cold fury I felt in the kitchen last Thanksgiving was gone. I stared at the screen the exact same way I looked at satellite imagery of a hostile compound in a briefing room. I analyzed him. He was sloppy. He placed his hand on his weapon without a perceived threat. He failed to identify himself properly. He conducted an illegal detainment of a federal employee without probable cause. He was completely drunk on his own localized power. He left a perfect, undeniable digital trail. A sharp double knock on the door frame broke the silence. 0430 hours. Master Sergeant Thomas Becker stood in the doorway. He held a stack of printed morning reports in his left hand and a black coffee in his right. His boots were spit-shined to a mirror finish. His uniform was flawless. Becker did not share my blood. We did not eat holiday dinners together. But he pulled me out of a burning Humvee outside Fallujah 7 years ago, taking shrapnel in his own shoulder to do it. That made him more family than anyone sitting at my mother's dining table. "Morning, Colonel," he said, taking a step inside. Then he stopped. His eyes locked onto the massive monitor. The video was still looping. Marcus barking his illegal orders. Marcus shoving the crumpled yellow ticket hard into my chest. Marcus strutting back to his cruiser like he owned the world. Becker's jaw hardened. The muscles in his neck pulled tight. The knuckles on his right hand turned completely white around the paper coffee cup. He squeezed it so hard the plastic lid popped slightly, a few drops of hot black coffee spilling onto his thumb. He didn't even flinch. He stepped closer to the desk. His voice dropped an octave, scraping the bottom of his throat. "Who the hell is this guy?" Becker demanded. "You want me to get the local county sheriff on the horn right now, Colonel? We can have this garbage stripped of his badge and sitting at a desk by sunrise." I leaned back in my chair. The heavy leather creaked in the quiet room. I interlocked my fingers and rested them on my lap. I did not look at Becker. My eyes stayed pinned to the screen. I reached out and hit the spacebar. The video froze. It stopped right on Marcus's face, right on that pathetic, untouchable smirk he wore when he told me to walk the line. He thought he was the absolute law. He thought his little tin badge made him a god over women. "No, Thomas," I said. My voice was completely flat, cold as ice. "We are not calling his boss. We are not doing him the favor of keeping this a local administrative issue." Becker paused, his eyes shifting from the frozen screen to my face. He knew that tone. He knew exactly what it meant when I stopped raising my voice. "Get me a secure line," I ordered, my eyes boring into Marcus's frozen digital face. "Put me through to Victoria Hayes at the Inspector General's office. Tell her to clear her morning schedule. We are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. Deprivation of rights under color of law." Becker's rigid posture relaxed just a fraction. A grim, knowing satisfaction flashed in his eyes. He set the leaking coffee cup down on the edge of my desk. "Yes, ma'am. Making the call now." He turned on his heel and marched out of the office. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him, sealing the room in silence once again. I leaned forward. I picked up a red marker from my pen cup. I reached out and tapped the plastic cap against the glass of the monitor right over the center of Marcus's chest, right where his badge sat. The trap was set. All he had to do was step on the wire. 2 days later, the break room at the county sheriff's precinct. The room smelled like old burnt coffee and cheap sugary glaze. It was a miserable windowless box painted in a depressing shade of institutional beige. Marcus sat slumped in a sagging pleather chair that squeaked with every shifting movement. His heavy mud-caked uniform boots were propped up on the scratched laminate coffee table. He was chewing loudly on a stale jelly donut, powdered sugar clinging to the coarse stubble on his chin. 3 other deputies were lounging around the room, killing time before shift change. Marcus had an audience, and he was milking it for every ounce of pathetic glory he could squeeze out. "I am telling you," Marcus boasted, spitting crumbs onto his uniform shirt. I hit the sirens, and she pulled over like a scared little civilian. Didn't matter that she was in a Fed Tahoe. Out there, I owned the asphalt. He wiped his greasy fingers on his dark uniform trousers. He pushed himself out of the creaking chair and stood up. He puffed his chest out, sucked in his gut, and began to march back and forth across the sticky linoleum floor. He swung his arms in a rigid, exaggerated imitation of a military march. "Look at me, I'm Colonel Perfect," he mocked, pitching his voice into a high nasal whine. "I got medals, I'm so tough." But the second I flashed the MIG light in her eyes, total compliance. I had her walking the white line like a common drunk. 2 of the younger deputies chuckled. It was the cheap, hollow laughter of men who cover up their own insecurities by tearing down someone else. Marcus grinned, soaking up the validation. He was desperately draining this manufactured victory to cover up the gaping hole of his own inadequacy. The heavy break room door swung open, hitting the rubber wall stop with a dull thud. Officer Gregory Finch walked in. He was older, his uniform sharper, his eyes holding the weary caution of a man who actually respected the badge. Finch walked past the laughing group, opened the mini-fridge, and pulled out a bottle of water. He unscrewed the cap and took a slow drink. He had heard the whole story from the hallway. "You are out of your damn mind, Evans," Finch said. His voice was low, devoid of any amusement. Marcus stopped his ridiculous march. The smug smile slipped, replaced by a defensive scowl. "What is your problem, Greg?" "My problem." Finch leaned back against the counter. "You pulled over a federal vehicle. You detained a commanding officer of the United States Army because you have a personal vendetta against your sister-in-law. You did not have probable cause. You did not have jurisdiction. I smelled alcohol." Marcus lied instantly, a natural reflex. "Bullshit," Finch fired back. "If she reports this up the federal chain, they are not going to send a complaint to Internal Affairs. They are going to send the FBI. That piece of tin on your chest is going to be worth scrap metal by Friday." Marcus scoffed loudly. He leaned over and spat a wad of saliva into the gray plastic trash can. He did not care about procedure. He only cared about power. "You worry too much, old man," Marcus sneered, dropping back into his chair. "This is family business. She is not going to file anything." "Why are you so sure?" Finch asked, narrowing his eyes. Marcus leaned forward, resting his thick forearms on his knees. A truly ugly, predatory smile stretched across his face. Because she knows what happens if she opens her mouth, Marcus said softly. If she makes a move on my badge, Sarah pays the price at home. She knows I will take the kids. She knows I am the law in that house. Jillian is a lot of things, but she is not going to sacrifice her precious little sister. Finch stared at him for a long, disgusted second. He set his water bottle down on the counter, shook his head, and walked out of the break room without another word. Marcus watched him leave, feeling a surge of absolute supremacy. He wanted to prove it. He wanted to rub it in. He pulled his heavy smartphone out of his pocket. His thick thumbs tapped aggressively against the glass screen. Did you pay that ticket yet, sis? Better watch your speed on my roads. Don't worry, I am cooking dinner for Sarah tonight. She's being a very good, quiet girl. He hit send. It was a repulsive, veiled threat, a reminder that he held a hostage. He tossed the phone onto the laminate table, kicked his boots back up, and laughed loudly at his own brilliance. He thought he held all the cards. He was completely clueless. 60 miles away, inside the secure, soundproof walls of the Federal Judge Advocate General Office, my phone buzzed on the polished mahogany conference table. I was sitting in a high-backed leather chair. My posture was perfectly straight. Directly across from me sat Victoria Hayes, a senior attorney for the Inspector General. Her desk was immaculate. A thick manila folder rested under her hands. I picked up the phone. I read the message. I did not frown. My hands did not shake. The pathetic threat did not ignite a spark of fear. It only confirmed what I already knew. He was a rabid dog, and rabid dogs do not get warnings. They get put down. I set the phone face down on the mahogany wood. A cold, flat smile touched the corners of my mouth. I looked up, meeting the steel-gray eyes of Victoria Hayes. He just sent the confirmation we needed, I said. My voice was steady, echoing slightly in the quiet, expensive room. He is actively using the threat of domestic retaliation to cover up a federal civil rights violation. Victoria Hayes did not smile. She simply nodded, opening the heavy manila folder. The paperwork inside was crisp, formal, and devastating. Are we green-lighting the operation, Colonel? She asked. I stood up. I buttoned the front of my uniform jacket, smoothing the fabric with one sharp, precise motion. File the paperwork, Victoria, I ordered. Destroy him. The soundproof walls of the JAG conference room swallowed every echo. The air felt sterile, completely sealed off from the noise of the outside world. Victoria Hayes pushed a thick manila folder across the polished mahogany table. The heavy textured paper scraped loudly against the wood. I reached out and flipped the cover open. The sharp, bitter smell of fresh printer toner hit my nose. It was not just a draft of our federal civil suit. Hayes had dug much deeper. She had pulled Marcus's internal affairs jacket. 12 complaints in 6 years. 12. I dragged my index finger down the printed list, feeling the indentation of the ink on the page. A busted lip on a 19-year-old kid during a routine traffic stop for a broken taillight. A fractured collarbone on a handcuffed DUI suspect in the precinct parking lot. Multiple reports of intimidation, excessive force, threatening behavior. Every single complaint ended with the exact same stamp in heavy red ink, exonerated by department review. The good old boy network at the county precinct had buried every single file. The blue wall of silence kept him in uniform, handing him a loaded weapon and a cruiser day after day. My jaw locked. The muscles in my neck pulled so tight they ached. Marcus was not just a stressed-out cop who drank too much on Thanksgiving. He was a systemic predator. He used his state-issued badge as a hunting license, and his buddies at the station handed him the ammunition. He thinks the uniform makes him bulletproof, Hayes said, leaning back in her heavy leather chair. We are going to prove him wrong. I closed the folder. The cardboard slapped shut with a sharp crack. File it, but give me exactly 14 days before the process server knocks on his door. Hayes frowned, her pen hovering over her legal pad. Why the delay? We have the evidence now. Because when a coward gets cornered, he punches down, I said flatly, my eyes locking onto hers. I need to clear the blast radius first. For the next 2 weeks, I went into complete tactical isolation. I established a strict no-contact zone. My cell phone vibrated constantly on my metal desk at the base. Incoming calls from my mother, text messages from my aunt. Word had quickly trickled down the family grapevine that I was stirring up trouble with Marcus over a traffic stop. The text messages were a pathetic, predictable display of enabler logic. Stop being so dramatic, Jillian. He's a good provider. You know his job is hard. You're going to ruin your sister's life over a stupid ticket. Grow up and apologize to him. I did not reply. I did not waste a single keystroke trying to explain myself to people who willingly traded their daughter's safety for a quiet Sunday dinner. I stared at the glowing screen, my face completely blank. My thumb hovered over the glass. Block caller. Block caller. Block caller. I severed the digital cord. Every flying monkey, every toxic relative trying to guilt-trip me into submission was instantly cut off. In warfare, if you want to isolate an enemy commander and force a surrender, you destroy his communication lines first. I left them screaming into a digital void. With the perimeter secure, I initiated the extraction. I knew exactly how Marcus operated. The second a federal subpoena landed in his sweaty hands, he would not come after me. He would go straight home, lock the heavy front door, and take his absolute rage out on Sarah. He would use her and the kids as human shields to force me to drop the suit. I went to the base credit union. I withdrew $8,000 in crisp, untraceable $100 bills from my deployment savings. I drove to the opposite end of the county, far outside Marcus's patrol jurisdiction. I rented a secure second-floor apartment under a fake corporate LLC. Then I waited for the perfect window. Tuesday morning, 0600 hours. Marcus backed his county cruiser out of the driveway to start his day shift. 10 minutes later, my black Tahoe rolled up to the curb. I unlocked the front door with the spare key and walked straight into the kitchen. Sarah was standing by the coffee maker. She was wearing a faded gray bathrobe, staring blankly at the wall. She looked exhausted, completely hollowed out by years of walking on eggshells. "Pack," I ordered. She blinked, startled, nearly dropping her ceramic mug. "Jill, what are you doing here? If Marcus comes back..." "Marcus is done." I cut her off. I dropped a heavy roll of black industrial trash bags onto the kitchen island. "We are not using suitcases. It takes too long. Grab your clothes. Grab the kids' essentials. You have 20 minutes. Blind panic flared in her eyes. The deep-seated conditioning tried to hold her hostage. "I can't. He will find me. He will take the kids, Jill. He has lawyers at the station. He told me." I closed the distance between us in 2 strides. I grabbed her by the shoulders. My grip was firm, grounding her spiraling panic with absolute physical force. "Look at me," I said, dropping my voice to a steady, commanding register. "He's not a god. He's a bully with a piece of tin. I have a safe house. I have a federal attorney. He's never touching you again. Now pack the bags." She stared at me. The absolute unbending certainty in my voice cracked her paralysis. She grabbed a plastic bag and ran up the narrow carpeted stairs. We moved like a tactical sweep. No talking. Just the frantic rustle of thick plastic and the heavy thuds of bags hitting the hardwood floor. I didn't let her fold anything. Speed was survival. I swept her bathroom counter into a bag, toothbrushes, medicine bottles, hairbrushes, all crashing together. I ripped open the desk drawer and grabbed the kids' birth certificates and social security cards. In 18 minutes, the Tahoe's trunk was packed tight. The heavy tailgate slammed shut. I drove her straight to the new apartment. The place smelled like fresh latex paint and industrial carpet cleaner. It was empty, quiet, and completely off the grid. I walked over to the cheap laminate kitchen counter. I set down 2 items. First, a brand new, freshly cut brass key. It clinked sharply against the countertop. Second, a thick stack of legal documents. The ink was still warm from the high-speed printer at the JAG office. It was a comprehensive divorce petition and an emergency request for full custody. Sarah stared at the papers. Her hands were shaking violently, but she reached out, picked up a black pen, and signed her name. Monday, week 3. 0700 hours. I sat at the small kitchen table in the safe house sipping black coffee from a paper cup. Sarah was asleep in the other room. The kids were safe. The fortress was locked down. 60 miles away in the quiet manicured suburbs, a black Ford Taurus pulled up to Marcus's driveway. The engine cut off. The car door opened with a heavy metallic creak. A man in a cheap gray suit stepped out onto the damp asphalt. He was not a cop. He was a private process server. He held a thick manila envelope in his right hand. He walked up the concrete path, his leather shoes clicking against the pavement, stepping past the kids' abandoned bicycles. He stopped right in front of the heavy oak front door. The timer had hit 0. The man raised his fist and knocked 3 hard, sharp times against the wood. 3 sharp knocks. Marcus jerked awake on the living room sofa. His heavy county cruiser was parked outside, but he had called in sick. A massive hangover pounded behind his eyes. He dragged his feet across the carpet, a half-empty mug of stale black coffee in his right hand. He swung the heavy oak door open, expecting a neighbor or a delivery driver. A man in a cheap gray suit stood on the concrete porch. He did not smile. He held a thick manila envelope. "Marcus Evans?" the man asked. His tone was completely flat, a bored professional doing a job. Marcus grunted, taking a sip of the cold coffee. "Yeah, who is asking?" The man shoved the manila envelope into Marcus's chest. The paper slapped against his faded gray t-shirt. "You have been served," the man said. He spun around and walked back down the driveway, his leather shoes clicking sharply on the asphalt. Marcus frowned. He set the coffee mug down on the entryway console table. His thick, clumsy fingers ripped the top of the envelope off. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. The paper felt heavy, official. His bloodshot eyes scanned the bold black ink at the top of the page. United States District Court, Middle District of Pennsylvania. Plaintiff Lieutenant Colonel Jillian Santos. Defendant Deputy Marcus Evans. Complaint for damages deprivation of civil rights under Section 1983. The color drained instantly from his face. His stomach bottomed out. The coffee mug on the edge of the console table slipped. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, cracked, dark liquid splattering across the baseboards and soaking into his socks. He did not notice. His hands began to shake. The thin sheets of paper rattled uncontrollably. He was not looking at a local IA complaint. He was looking at a federal civil rights lawsuit. They were coming for his badge. They were coming for his pension. Blind panic took over. He didn't bother changing out of his sweatpants. He threw a jacket over his t-shirt, grabbed his keys, and bolted for his cruiser. The tires squealed violently as he backed out of the driveway, tearing down the suburban street toward the precinct. He needed backup. He needed the brotherhood. 30 minutes later, Marcus shoved his way through the heavy glass doors of the county sheriff's office. He bypassed the front desk, ignoring the confused looks from the dispatchers. He was sweating profusely, his chest heaving. He barreled straight down the hallway and threw open the door to Captain William Thorne's office without knocking. Thorne was sitting behind a massive steel desk. He was a hard career cop with 30 years on the force. He looked up, his eyes narrowing at the intrusion. Marcus slammed the crumpled federal subpoena onto the metal desk. "Captain, you have to see this." Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with hysteria. "My sister-in-law has completely lost her mind. She is dragging a stupid family argument into federal court. The county needs to assign a defense attorney to me right now. She is trying to ruin my life." He expected Thorne to stand up. He expected the usual protective shield of the precinct to drop over him. He expected the old network to close ranks. Captain Thorne did not move. He slowly took off his reading glasses. He picked up a separate thin file resting on the corner of his desk. He opened it and pulled out a stack of high-resolution color photographs. He tossed them across the desk. They slid over the federal subpoena and stopped right in front of Marcus's shaking hands. Marcus looked down. They were still frames pulled directly from my Tahoe's dash cam and my phone's recording. There was Marcus, his hand aggressively resting on his Glock. There was Marcus shining the tactical mag light straight into my eyes. There was Marcus smirking like a tyrant as he forced a federal officer to walk a white line without a shred of probable cause. "Family argument?" Thorne asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus swallowed hard. His throat was completely dry. "Captain, she was swerving. I was just doing my job. You know how she is. She's just trying to make me look bad." Thorne stood up. The heavy metal chair scraped violently against the floor. You used a county vehicle. Thorne roared, the sound bouncing off the cinder block walls. You wore a county uniform. You used county authority to conduct an illegal traffic stop on a federal logistics officer, and you did it on tape. Marcus recoiled, shrinking back toward the door. The loud, arrogant bully from the break room was entirely gone. He looked small, pathetic. I can fix this, sir," Marcus stammered, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. "Just give me a chance to talk to her. I can make her drop it." "You are not talking to anyone in that uniform," Thorne snapped. He pointed a thick, calloused finger directly at Marcus's chest. "You are a massive liability, Evans. The JAG office just dumped your entire history on my desk. 12 excessive force complaints. 12. You are done hiding behind this department." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The safety net was gone. "You are suspended." Thorne stated, his tone absolute. "Without pay. Effective immediately. Turn in your weapon. Turn in your badge. And do not expect this county to spend a single dime defending your absolute stupidity." Marcus stood there, his mouth slightly open. He reached up with trembling fingers and unclipped the heavy silver star from his chest. He set it on the desk. He unbuckled his duty belt and laid the Glock next to it. Without the badge, he was nothing. He was just a terrified, hollow man in dirty sweatpants. He stumbled out of the captain's office. The hallway was dead silent. The other deputies, the guys who had laughed at his jokes in the break room just 2 days ago, were standing there. Officer Finch crossed his arms and looked away. No one made eye contact. The Brotherhood had completely cut him loose. He was a disease, and the system was amputating him to save itself. Marcus rushed out of the precinct, the cold air hitting his sweaty face. He felt entirely empty. The power he relied on to terrorize his family was sitting on a metal desk. He needed control. He needed to feel big again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hammered the screen, dialing Sarah's number. He was going to scream at her. He was going to order her to call me, to beg me to fix this mess right now. She was his hostage. She had to obey. He pressed the phone to his ear, his chest heaving, ready to unleash hell. If you have ever watched a bully get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button right now. And drop a karma in the comments if you believe the universe always balances the scales. Let's see how his hostage situation plays out. The line clicked, but it did not ring. Instead, a flat, automated female voice filled his ear. "We're sorry. The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service." Marcus froze. He stared at the black screen of his phone. His badge was gone, his backup was gone, and now his victim was gone. 2 months. That was how long it took the federal machine to grind Marcus down to a court date. The morning of the hearing, the safe house was completely silent. I stood in front of the cheap, warped mirror attached to the back of the bedroom door. I did not reach for a polite civilian pantsuit. I did not wear civilian clothes at all. I pulled the heavy, dark blue fabric of my Army service uniform over my shoulders. The stiff material scraped roughly against my skin. It felt like armor. I buttoned the front, my thumbs pressing the polished brass firmly through the heavy buttonholes. I smoothed the sharp creases down my sleeves, ensuring the fabric laid completely flat, flawless. Then I picked up my ribbon rack. The heavy metal pins dug into my fingers. I aligned it perfectly above my left breast pocket and pushed the pins through the thick wool. The bronze star sat dead center. For years, my mother and my uncle mocked this uniform. They called it playing soldier. They ignored the combat zones, the sand and the blood, pretending my rank was just some glorified administrative title so they could maintain the illusion that Marcus was the only real man in the family. Not today. Today, this uniform was a battering ram, and I was going to use it to smash their fragile, pathetic world to pieces. The door hinge squeaked. I turned. Sarah stood in the doorway. She wore a crisp, light blue blazer. The color was soft, but the structure of the jacket gave her shoulders a sharp, defined edge. She looked entirely different from the woman huddled in the kitchen on Thanksgiving night. Her skin had color. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. The massive, ugly four-finger bruise on her bicep was completely gone. 2 months away from a predator had given her a pulse again. She was no longer a hostage. She was a survivor. I looked at her, keeping my voice low and steady. "Are you ready?" She did not flinch. She did not look down at the carpet. She held her head up and met my eyes. "Marcus called Mom last night," Sarah said. Her voice carried a slight tremor, but it did not break. "Mom texted me at 2:00 a.m. She called me a homewrecker. She said I was tearing the family apart over nothing. She demanded I tell you to drop the lawsuit or she is done with me." A familiar icy disgust washed over my ribs. The ultimate enabler. Even now facing federal charges and domestic abuse, my mother chose the abuser. She chose the illusion of a quiet house over the safety of her own daughter. I picked up my black beret from the dresser. I settled it onto my head, adjusting the angle with sharp, precise pulls until the unit flash sat perfectly over my left eye. "Good," I stated, staring at Sarah through the mirror. "Then today we permanently execute that version of our family." Sarah took a deep breath, the fabric of her blue blazer rising and falling. She nodded once, a hard, definitive motion. We walked out of the apartment. The drive to the federal civil courthouse was quiet. We parked in the massive concrete structure attached to the building. The Pennsylvania wind howled through the open levels of the garage, biting and sharp, freezing the moisture in my breath. We stepped out of the Tahoe. I did not hunch my shoulders against the cold. I walked straight, my black Corfram shoes clicking sharply against the freezing concrete. Sarah walked right beside me, matching my pace. We pushed through the heavy revolving glass doors. The heat of the courthouse lobby hit us instantly. The air smelled of floor wax, old paper, and stale sweat. The security guards at the metal detectors took one look at the heavy brass on my uniform. They stood up straighter. They did not bark orders. They cleared us through with quiet professional respect. We walked down the long, sweeping marble corridor. Our footsteps echoed loudly, bouncing off the high, vaulted ceilings. Lawyers in gray suits rushed past us, clutching briefcases, whispering frantically into their phones. We ignored them all. At the end of the hall, the corridor dead-ended into a massive set of solid oak double doors. Courtroom number 4. We stopped. I could hear the muffled low hum of voices on the other side of the heavy wood. Marcus was in there. His defense attorney was in there. The federal judge was waiting. The battlefield was set. Sarah's breathing hitched. I saw her fingers twitch, the old conditioned panic trying to claw its way back into her chest. The ghost of Marcus's yelling, the memory of his heavy hands tried to freeze her in place. I reached out. I grabbed her hand. Her palm was clammy and shaking. I tightened my grip. I squeezed her hand with absolute, unyielding force, anchoring her to the marble floor. I did not give her a motivational speech. I did not tell her it was going to be okay. I just let her feel the solid, unbreakable weight of my grip. She looked at my hand, then looked up at my face. The panic in her eyes slowly receded, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. I let go of her hand. I raised my right arm. I placed my flat palm flat against the heavy brass handle of the oak door. I shoved it hard. Clack! The latch disengaged. The heavy door swung open, violently crashing against the interior wall. The heavy oak door hit the rubber wall stop with a loud, echoing crack. The low hum of whispers inside courtroom number 4 died instantly. Every head turned, every eye locked onto the doorway. I stepped over the threshold. My black Corfram shoes hit the carpeted aisle. I walked straight down the center, my posture rigid, the brass on my uniform catching the harsh overhead lights. Sarah walked exactly half a pace behind my right shoulder. Marcus was sitting at the defendant's table. He wore an ill-fitting gray suit that looked tight across his thick shoulders. When the door opened, he leaned back in his chair. He tried to pull up that same arrogant, untouchable smirk he wore in the kitchen, ready to intimidate his way out of the room. Then his eyes registered my uniform, the rank, the medals. Then his eyes shifted and he saw Sarah. The smirk froze. It did not just fade, it shattered. The flushed, ruddy color drained completely from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pale gray. He gripped the edge of the wooden table so hard his knuckles turned white. He had spent 2 months searching for her. He had called my mother, threatened my uncle, and scoured the county trying to find the woman he owned. Now she was standing directly in front of him, but she was not looking at her shoes. She was not crying. She was staring straight through him, standing in the shadow of a federal officer. He swallowed hard. He knew in that exact second that his hostage was gone forever. "All rise," the bailiff barked. Judge Arthur Sterling walked up to the bench. He was in his late 60s, a hard, no-nonsense federal judge with zero patience for clowns wasting his docket. He sat down, adjusted his reading glasses, and looked over the file. "Case number 44B, Judge Sterling announced. His voice was a low gravel that commanded absolute silence. Santos versus Evans, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Victoria Hayes stood up from the plaintiff's table. Her dark suit was flawless. She did not waste time with a theatrical opening statement. She picked up a small black flash drive and handed it to the court clerk. "Your Honor, Plaintiff's Exhibit A," Hayes stated clearly. "Audio and visual recording of the incident in question." The clerk plugged the drive into the court system. A large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom filled with the harsh, grating static of highway wind. Then the red and blue strobes painted the screen. Marcus's face loomed into the frame, bloated and aggressive. "Step out. Now. I'm conducting a field sobriety test." His voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls. It sounded incredibly loud. It sounded cheap. The video kept playing. The court watched him shove the yellow ticket hard into my chest. They watched his sneering, arrogant walk back to his cruiser. I looked over at the defendant's table. Marcus had shrunk. He was hunched forward, his heavy shoulders rounded, trying to make himself as small as possible. The heavy leather chair suddenly looked 3 sizes too big for him. His defense attorney, a sweaty, overweight guy named Callahan, was aggressively rubbing his forehead with a handkerchief. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was thick, suffocating. "Mr. Callahan," Judge Sterling said. He took off his glasses and dropped them on the bench. The sound of the plastic hitting the wood sounded like a gunshot. "Explain this to me. Before I ask the U.S. Attorney's Office to look into criminal charges." Callahan jumped up. He knocked his legal pad off the table in his panic. He fumbled, gripping the podium tight. "Your Honor, please." Callahan stammered, his voice reedy and thin. "My client, Deputy Evans. He admits his behavior was overly aggressive. But we must look at the context. This is fundamentally an internal family dispute. The plaintiff is my client's sister-in-law. There is bad blood here. This was just inappropriate joking between family members that escalated. The federal court should not waste resources on a domestic squabble. It was a pathetic, disgusting attempt to throw gasoline on a fire. He was using the exact same excuse my mother used in the kitchen. It is just family. Sweep it under the rug. I did not wait for my lawyer to object. I did not look at the judge for permission. I stood up. The scrape of my chair was the only sound in the room. I stood at attention. I did not look at the judge. I turned my head and locked my eyes directly onto Callahan. The sweaty defense attorney stopped talking. He actually took a half step backward from the podium. "When he stands in my mother's kitchen, he is my brother-in-law," I stated. My voice was not loud. It was low, carrying the deadly razor-sharp edge of a blade being pulled from a sheath. But when he pins a county badge to his chest, turns on his police sirens, and illegally detains a federal officer on a dark highway, he ceases to be family. He's a state actor abusing his authority. I took one step out from behind the table. I shifted my gaze, looking down at Marcus. He flinched, refusing to meet my eyes. "I am not here to settle a Thanksgiving argument." I said, my words dropping like anvils onto the quiet room. "I am here to permanently strip him of the weapon he uses to terrorize human lives." The mic dropped. Callahan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Marcus, then looked at the judge. He slowly sat back down, completely defeated. The defense was pulverized into dust. Judge Sterling stared at the defendant's table for a long, heavy moment. Then he reached for his wooden gavel. He raised it high in the air. Crack! Marcus was sweating. He was sitting in the witness stand, but he looked like a man strapped to an electric chair. The harsh overhead lighting of the federal courtroom highlighted every bead of grease on his forehead. He had no weapon, no radio, no badge. He was entirely stripped of his armor, and he hated it. Judge Sterling leaned forward. The heavy wood of his bench creaked. He stared down at Marcus with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Mr. Evans," Sterling growled. "You are under oath. Did you initiate that traffic stop because you perceived a legitimate threat to public safety, or did you do it because you wanted to humiliate the plaintiff?" Marcus gripped the wooden railing of the witness stand. His knuckles were white. He looked over at his defense attorney Callahan, who was staring down at his legal pad, actively avoiding eye contact. There was no help coming. No brotherhood to sweep this under the rug. I was under a lot of pressure, Your Honor," Marcus stammered. His voice was a thin, reedy squeak. It cracked over the courtroom microphone. "The job is stressful, and at home, they don't respect me. They look down on me. I just wanted her to listen for once." It was a pathetic, cowardly confession. The big tough cop from the Thanksgiving dinner table was completely gone. Stripped of his authority, he was nothing but a fragile, insecure bully who needed a gun to feel like a man. He had just admitted to abusing his power on the federal record. Judge Sterling did not flinch. He picked up his wooden gavel. "Your behavior is a stain on law enforcement," Sterling stated, his voice echoing off the walls. "You used the authority granted to you by the state to terrorize a citizen. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff." The judge looked down at a piece of paper, signing his name with a heavy, angry stroke. "I am ordering a civil penalty of $35,000 in compensatory damages. Furthermore, this judgment will be forwarded to the National Decertification Index. You will never wear a badge in this country again. We are adjourned." Crack! The gavel hit the wood. The sound signaled the absolute destruction of his pathetic, tyrannical empire. I stood up. I buttoned my uniform jacket. I did not look at him. Sarah stood up next to me, her face completely blank. We turned and walked down the center aisle, pushing through the heavy oak doors and out into the sweeping marble corridor. We were halfway to the elevators when I heard the heavy, desperate slap of his dress shoes hitting the marble floor behind us. Sarah, wait." I stopped. I turned slowly. Marcus was running down the hall. His cheap gray suit was wrinkled, the collar of his shirt soaked with sweat. He looked completely unhinged. He threw himself down on his knees right in front of Sarah. The heavy thud of his kneecaps hitting the solid marble floor echoed loudly. He grabbed the fabric of her light blue blazer, pulling her toward him. He was crying. Thick, ugly tears streamed down his flushed face. Snot bubbled at the corner of his nose. "Sarah, please," he sobbed, his voice raw and broken. "Tell her to drop the damages. I am bankrupt. I have nothing left. I will change. I swear to God, I will change. We can go to counseling. Please, for our family." I looked down at him. The disgust in my gut was absolute. He was not crying because he was sorry. He was not crying because he remembered the massive four-finger bruise he left on her arm last Thanksgiving. He was crying because he lost his toy. He lost his badge, his gun, and his 35 grand. He was begging the woman he used to beat, demanding that she save him from the consequences of his own actions. It was the ultimate disgusting display of a coward. Sarah looked down at him. Her breathing hitched. For one split second, the heavy weight of 10 years of manipulation dragged at her. Her right foot shifted back, a deeply ingrained reflex to retreat, to appease, to fix the monster so he would stop yelling. I did not let it happen. I stepped forward. I wedged myself directly between Sarah and Marcus, cutting off his grip on her blazer. My heavy combat boots planted firmly on the marble floor, creating an impenetrable wall of dark blue wool and brass. I looked down at the pathetic, sweating mess of a man on the floor. "Family is not a bunker for you to hide your garbage in, Marcus," I said. My voice was a dead, quiet whisper that cut straight through his sobbing. "The divorce papers will be served at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow." He stopped crying for a second, his mouth hanging open in shock. I did not give him time to speak. I reached behind me, grabbed Sarah's hand, and turned my back on him. We walked away. Behind us, Marcus started screaming. Loud, desperate, pathetic wails that bounced off the high, vaulted ceilings of the courthouse. I did not turn around. I did not slow my pace. I kept my eyes fixed on the glass doors at the end of the hall. We pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the freezing, biting wind of the parking garage. The heavy glass swung shut behind us. The sound of his screaming was completely cut off. It was finally quiet. 2 months. That was how long it took for the dust to completely settle. The federal system had processed the tumor and spat it out. I sat at my kitchen counter holding a heavy ceramic mug of black coffee. The morning sun cut through the blinds, casting warm, sharp lines across the hardwood floor of the safe house. The air was quiet. It was the kind of deep, unbroken quiet that only exists when a threat has been entirely neutralized. I took a slow sip. I didn't need to look at the paperwork sitting on the counter, but I did anyway. The final update from Victoria Hayes was brief and devastatingly clean. Marcus Evans was no longer a deputy. He was permanently blacklisted on the National Decertification Index. The guy who used to strut around the county in Kevlar bullying women and racking up excessive force complaints was now working the graveyard shift as a security guard at an auto salvage yard on the edge of town. He sat in a rusted-out booth for 10 hours a night watching stray dogs piss on tires. He didn't even get to keep all his minimum wage paycheck. The court ordered a direct wage garnishment to pay off the $35,000 civil penalty he owed me. Every 2 weeks, the state reached into his bank account and took their cut. He was bankrupt, he was disgraced, he was a ghost. I folded the paper and pushed it aside. The front door unlocked. The deadbolt clicked open with a heavy, solid thud. Sarah walked in. She was carrying a cardboard tray holding 2 iced coffees and a brown paper bag from a local bakery. She was wearing dark slacks and a fitted gray sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She set the coffees down on the counter. She looked up at me. She smiled. It was not the nervous, flinching smile she used to wear around Marcus. It wasn't the tight, forced grimace she put on during our mother's toxic Thanksgiving dinners. It was a real, relaxed, genuine smile, the kind of smile that reaches the corners of the eyes. The divorce was finalized last week, uncontested. Marcus did not have the money for a lawyer, and he did not have the badge to intimidate a judge. Sarah got full custody of the kids, the house, and the last shred of his dignity. She had already landed an administrative job at a local logistics firm. She was free. "I got the blueberry scones," Sarah said, pulling the pastry from the bag. "The ones you actually like." I nodded, picking up one of the iced coffees. "Thanks. You ready for your shift?" "Yeah," she replied, taking a bite. "I'm actually looking forward to it. It is quiet there." Quiet. It was the greatest luxury she had ever owned. I left the safe house an hour later. I drove my Tahoe onto the military base, but I did not head to my usual office. I parked outside the massive concrete auditorium of the Army War College. I walked through the double doors, my boots clicking rhythmically against the polished terrazzo floor. The room was packed. Over 300 young officers and enlisted soldiers sat in the tiered seating. The murmur of low conversation died the exact second I stepped onto the wooden stage. They snapped to attention. A wave of dark blue and green uniforms pulling rigid. "Take your seats," I commanded, stepping up to the heavy oak podium. The synchronized thud of 300 bodies hitting the chairs echoed through the massive hall. I looked out over the crowd. I saw young, ambitious faces, men and women who had just sworn an oath, pinning shiny new rank to their collars. They were waiting for a lecture on supply chain logistics. They were waiting for me to talk about convoy routes and inventory management. I gripped the edges of the oak podium. The wood felt solid under my palms. "We are not talking about supply routes today." I started, my voice projecting loud and clear through the microphone, echoing off the back wall. "We are talking about the uniform you are wearing right now." I swept my eyes across the front row. "Respect is not a given," I stated, my tone dropping, grinding into the silence. "You do not automatically earn it just because you put on that fabric. You do not get a free pass because you carry a weapon or a badge." I thought about Marcus. I thought about the heavy, arrogant swagger he used to hide his absolute cowardice. "Power is a weight," I continued, my voice sharp. "It is a heavy, unforgiving weight. It is not a tool for you to step on someone's neck to cover up your own internal weakness. It is not a license to be a tyrant." The room was dead silent. No one moved, no one coughed. They were locked in. You will encounter people who use their authority to abuse the vulnerable, I said, leaning closer to the microphone. Sometimes those people will wear the same uniform as you. Sometimes they will carry a local badge. And sometimes they will sit across from you at your own family dinner table. I stood up perfectly straight, my spine rigid. Do not ever tolerate the abuse of power. I commanded, my voice ringing with absolute, icy authority. I do not care if it is a stranger on a highway or someone who shares your blood. When you see a bully using their authority to terrorize someone weaker, you do not look away. You do not sweep it under the rug. You crush it. I held the silence for 5 long seconds. The air in the auditorium felt electric. Dismissed. I stepped back from the podium. The entire room erupted into a deafening, unified roar as 300 soldiers snapped to attention and saluted. I walked off the stage. My job was done. The toxic tumor was permanently removed from my family. The corrupt cop was stripped of his fangs. And the sister I loved more than anything had her life back. I didn't care that my mother blocked my number. I didn't care that I ruined the family image. I traded a lie for the truth, and I would make that trade every single day of the week. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to a bully in your own family? Have you ever had to cut off toxic relatives to protect yourself or someone you love? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of survivors. If you believe that true strength means standing up to abuse, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. It is time we take our boundaries back.